Hello, everybody. This is Noah and John, and we are with UrbanDigs. And Johnny, we are talking Manhattan today. We got a real good one going on right now. We got Jeremy Stein, co-founder of the Stein Team over at Sotheby's. These guys are production monsters, Johnny. Over 200 million annual sales, consistently ranked in the top of producing in the sales team at Sotheby. They're a top 75 team in the United States as a country. So these guys do a hell of a lot of production, and we got them to ourselves for 15 or 20 minutes. And Jeremy, I'm going to just jump right into fire and ask you right off the bat, please tell us, because we're all confused, what is going on in the world of Manhattan real estate?
Well, thanks, Noah. Thanks, John, for having me, first and foremost. So, look, obviously, we just had an election, and so we're at maybe at a bit of an inflection point. My answer probably would be a little bit different just a couple of weeks ago. But I think right now, regardless of who you voted for, there seems to be, at least from my perspective, a little bit of confidence in the financial markets because of the election. And that seems to be trickling down, as far as I can tell, into the real estate market in New York. Not necessarily getting into every facet of the market, but the high end, which has actually been doing well prior to the election, has been doing quite well. I've seen something somewhat unique, which is for the first time in my career, there's been a vast majority of the deals have been happening off market. So we've done a lot of business off market this year, stuff that's not even getting really reported. The mid market is probably where I think it's a little bit hardest right now still, because you've got people with wealth, but they're still not sure. They're still focused on interest rates, and a lot of them are work in finance, so they tend to overthink things a little bit. And then I don't want to call it low end, but the sort of 4 million and all the way down, that market seems to have really picked up in the last couple of months. And since the election, I feel like it's continued that way. So, I'm kind of bullish on things in at least the near future. It just feels better than it did, a year ago.
It does feel better than it did. And I'm wondering, how much of that is related to sort of a lessening of uncertainty, right? Because we had Fed uncertainty for a while, we had economic uncertainty for a while, we've had election uncertainty for a while. It seems like we've sort of crossed over a lot of these bridges. And I just want to dig into something you said, Jeremy, because I'm really interested in that off-market market. Could you touch on that? I'm just curious, is that a broad sector of the market? Does it run from like low price to high price, or is it exclusively a luxury thing? And how much does confidence and uncertainty fit into that market?
Yeah, so good question. I mean, like, first of all, like, you use the word luxury. I think of luxury as being that can be a $2 million studio, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be luxury is more of a sort of lifestyle and like a great apartment than it is a price point. And I think in the luxury market, that's where you're seeing off-market deals. So if it's a unicorn, right? I mean, if it's just an apartment that's just been done at a completely different level, or it's an apartment that is at the top of a building, something that's one of one or one of very few, those apartments you can sell off market, and you get a couple calls from a couple agents, and they say, hey, I got something that isn't going to be coming around very often. You want to come take a look at it. You take a look and you realize right away this would be great for my client. Those things are selling. And I think they're selling because buyers still feel like they really only want to buy if the product is something that they're worried if they don't buy it today, someone else will, right? There's got to be that urgency. And if there is the urgency, they're going to buy it because they want to stop somebody else from buying it out from under them. And more often than not, that does seem to be in the higher end market, but it can be a luxurious one bedroom apartment too. Where you're not seeing it is, apartment 34C in a building that has 40 C line apartments. That's an apartment that nobody's going to get too worried is going to never come up again, because there's 33 other C lines that will come up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Jeremy, I want to ask you really quickly about off market. I mean, I assume that these are listings that are not being syndicated in the RLS system. Are they Are they seen by the brokerage community, or these are just pocket kind of listings off market completely?
I mean, they are being shared with a lot of real estate agents, right? So, I'll get a text. I mean, we did a deal this year where I literally got a text from another agent, and it was just a video. There was no address, there was nothing. And I looked at the video, and I think I could just tell right away what building it was, and I knew that it was an apartment where I knew where the apartment was in the building based upon the video. And I immediately was like, I got somebody for that. And I can't speak to how many other people got that video, but it was,
Right.
I'm sure I wasn't the only one there who did. We have a couple things like that too, but we're trying to get it out to as many agents as we can. But it's not on the RLS, and it's sort of word of mouth, and it's all because our clients don't at that moment want to list it. They're not ready yet. And I know there's a whole issue of clear cooperation, which is something that's a whole other topic. But ultimately, those properties, if they don't sell relatively quickly off market, end up on the RLS and then Street Easy and Zillow and what have you.
Right.
Right. Well, Jeremy, thank you for that look behind the curtain, because it's very rare that we actually have the opportunity to kind of dig into that. So I appreciate your sharing that. And I'd also like to kind of, while that curtain's open, we can peer into it. I want to ask you about something that we're constantly asked, and that is the price reduction conversation. And I'm curious how an agent at the height that you are, the production volume that you do, how do you approach that conversation? What does it look like from your end when it comes time to have it?
Yeah. So where credit should go where it's due. I got this from a guy I know who his name is Thomas Wright, and he's a Sotheby's owner of franchises in California, Utah, all over the place, out west. Brilliant guy, but years ago, and he made it very clear: you need to earn it. You need to earn as an agent. You need to earn the price reduction. And if you think about it that way, getting a price reduction should be a lot easier. And if you're dealing with a relatively reasonable client, it should be very easy. And by earn it, I mean, you can't, there's this impression I think sellers have that we work really hard to get the listing. And then once we get the listing, we take some pictures, we throw it online, and we sit back and we wait. And if it doesn't sell, we call them a couple weeks later and go, hey, guess what? We couldn't sell it. Let's reduce the price. Your clients need to feel, because it's true, that asking them for a price reduction is the last thing that you want to do, and that you're going to do absolutely everything else you can before to get to that point. And that's where you earn it, by showing them what you're doing, which means, first of all, you got to work hard, and you got to do a lot of different things. You got to make sure that you're reevaluating the listing weekly. You're sharing feedback. You're looking at the photographs that you've taken and deciding, are these the right photographs? Are they in the right order? Should we re-photograph? What can we do differently? Should we do some rendering? Should we do some virtual staging? Whatever it is. And you need to share that information. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've taken over listings from other agents. And the first question I have when I'm meeting with the prospective seller is, so tell me, how many showings did you have? What was the feedback? And they're like, I don't know. I got no idea. And that's a sign that they did not work with an agent who was earning anything, because they weren't giving them information. But if you've done that and you've given them enough information and they can see that you're doing absolutely everything that you possibly can, hopefully it's their idea. They're the ones who are like, well, maybe we need to talk about price. And often that's not the case, and you still have to bring it up. But when you do, they're not looking at you just sort of thinking like, well, of course you're asking for that, because that's just going to make your job easier.
Yeah. I've spoken to a lot of sellers when I was transacting, and I was a seller myself, and I actually lived it myself. A lot of sellers do think about that price cut. Like in the back of their head, they're like, all right, I'm starting here, but like at some point, like when should I consider a price cut, and how much should like every seller has to know that. So like
Yeah.
I feel like agents should just go in confident, manage expectations, like you said, do everything that you possibly can, earn it, and then that should really be an easy conversation, just like you're saying.
Yeah, and the other part of it is, of course, that what you've got to be very careful about and vigilant about is don't let your sellers talk themselves or you into a minimal price cut, right? Like sort of death by 1,000 price cuts is like the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Don't reduce the property by 2% or something. Like you essentially have to ask yourself, what's a number that's going to reset this listing? And what's a number that's going to bring old people who walked away from it back to the table? And what's going to bring people who maybe this was out of their budget to the property? Otherwise, there's no point. There's no point in reducing it. You start to look like sort of when you look down on Street Easy or whatever, and you see 50 price reductions, you're like, okay, I get what they're dealing with here.
That's really
Right.
great advice right there. All right, I want to ask you another question. I mean, from my desk, what I'm seeing here, I feel like inventory, it's not low. Inventory is not low, but it's certainly not high. I feel like we're kind of in this neutral slash kind of lower than usual kind of area. And now we're starting to see deal activity come back as uncertainty and all that fades, but we are seeing a recovery in the market. But it seems like it's hard to find opportunities out there. So, my question to you is that, if I'm an agent and I got buyers and I'm trying to find value opportunities is, where do you think that play is?
Yeah. So it's funny, I think we all agents always get these clients who are like, hey, give me a call if there's like a real great deal out there. They sort of have this vision that someone's going to call you and say, I'm underwater, I'll sell the apartment for $1 or something ridiculous. And of course that doesn't happen. But or at least in New York, it doesn't happen too often. But where I'm seeing a tremendous amount of opportunity is in properties that are in a state condition, properties that are in need of a gut renovation. I think that there's this sort of hangover that it still exists from COVID, where people have this impression that the supply chain has completely fallen apart, and there's freighter boats in the East River, still filled with Wolf refrigerators and stoves and things like that. Nobody can get any materials whatsoever, and as a result, there's this. People are terrified, I find, of doing renovations. They're worried about the cost and they're worried about the amount of time. And while, of course, to a degree, they should be concerned because that is always the case with a renovation, I think that it has gone way off the deep end. And people have this calculator in their head where when they're walking through an apartment that needs work, it's like 2x in their mind what it's actually going to cost. So they try to negotiate, and a lot of the sellers don't want to sell for that low a number. And as a result, particularly on the Upper East Side, but and particularly in pre-war co-ops, you're seeing properties sit for years, long periods of time, because people are terrified of renovations. So for me, I'm telling my clients who I think I can try to convince to bite the bullet that that's where the opportunities lie. Buy an apartment and renovate it. Make it your own. It's not going to cost as much. It's going to cost a lot of money, but it's not going to cost as much as you think. And when you're done, you're going to have exactly what you want, and you're going to be ahead of the game on day one.
Right. It's funny. We've seen the same thing, and we tend to see the opportunities in those same markets. I mean, we've seen a number of pre-war Upper East Side co-ops that are amazingly well located, tons of space, but it does need a full renovation. It's just a huge turnoff. And some of the research we've done has shown that premium is it's not at historic highs and it's come down a bit, but it still suggests opportunity. But on the other side, one of the things we've seen, and I'm curious if you could speak to this, is the age of renovations seems to have shrunk a little bit, in that people do a renovation and they put up the apartment on sale, and someone comes in 5 years later, they're like, well, this needs a renovation. It doesn't really last for as long as it may have lasted previously. I'm wondering if that's something you're seeing as well.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think I think that for what I find is, and I think it happens more as the price goes up, that the people who are spending more money have this sense of I need to put my own scent on the apartment. And that scent lifts my leg, right? And spray my scent on it. And it used to just be sort of a minor spraying. And now it's essentially like, I'm gutting this place.
Right.
I'm completely redoing everything. And to the point where when I'm walking around with my clients who are buyers, they'll say, yeah, we might redo a couple things here and there. And I caution them. I'm like, look, just so you know, that's a slippery slope, and you should be prepared to get convinced that you're going to redo the entire apartment by the end of this thing. And it's going to take a while, and you're going to spend a lot of money, even though you don't have to. It's elective. It really is elective. I also think that buyers are more and more aware of the sort of timestamp items in a kitchen, or the timestamp items in floor color, or whatever it is, where they walk into an apartment and they're like, oh, dark floors. Right. That was cool around 3-5 years ago. Not cool anymore. We need to redo the floors. Or, certain fixtures or certain, cabinet types. And they just go, oh, okay, this thing's old. We got to redo the whole thing. And you're like, listen, there was somebody living here like a week ago, very happily. And you could be that person too. But, there's just this sense of, no, I got to redo the whole thing.
Yeah, I will not live with quartz countertops.
Exactly.
No way. Yeah. I can't do it. You know what? You mentioned elective. You're so right with elective. Like, you don't have to spend $1,000 a square foot or $1,500 a square foot to renovate something. Like, I just want to say something. Yeah, like 5-6 years ago, before the pandemic, $350 to $500 a square foot was like a top tier level renovation. And like, again, we talk about this, John, often. Pandemic happened. You had this inflation. It's come down, but the perception of high inflation, I'm sure it's still there in labor and other stuff like that. But the cost of the goods have gone way back down. Yet there's this reality out there that, oh, it's going to cost me $1,500 to renovate this thing, which is almost like creating a penalty, a massive penalty, which is creating an opportunity, which you're talking about right now. And for anyone that's in a situation where you own the renovation group, the crew, right? And you got a team that, oh, I got a contract, we could do this at $300 or less. We can get this thing done really, really nice. There's an arbitrage opportunity out there in Manhattan real estate right now. And we are, John, we're doing advisor reports for potential investors looking to flip properties and they're looking at these kind of things. So like it's a real thing out there. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing, right? That's the way to do it, right? Is to have a team in place, and maybe even particularly if you're thinking about flipping these things, have a team in place that has some skin in the game, right? So that everybody's sort of working towards the same goal, which is to keep costs down and to do it as quickly as you can. Because obviously the carry, while you're not living there, you're not selling it, that eats into your bottom line.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So Jeremy, one of the things that I think you've mentioned a couple of times is sort of this idea that there's agent community intelligence coming back to you, whether it's text for listings that may be coming onto the market or just, ideas of where there might be opportunities. I'm wondering if you could dig into that for us and talk about sort of the value of the agent community.
Yeah. Well, it's really important to me. And I say this a lot, but you probably have to edit it out. It's like, don't be a dick, just like as an agent, I think that there's a lot of people who don't think of the community of agents as colleagues. They think of them as competition, and they have sort of an antagonistic approach towards one another. And that does nobody any good whatsoever. It also doesn't help the industry optically. The reality is that, if you share information if you reach across the aisle, so to speak, and you share information with your colleagues, if you offer to help them out, if they call you and say, hey, listen, I got a tough client. He really doesn't feel like enough people have come through my property. Could you come to this open house? I try to do that as much as I possibly can. I try to go to as many of those things as I can. If someone calls me and asks me for a contract price before it's printed, unless there's some reason I'm not allowed to do it, I will. and you want to help each other out. And by doing that, I think that you establish a relationship with individual agents and a reputation amongst your peers. And that's who they are, they're your peers. That you can be trusted and you're someone that they want to work with. And I find, just yesterday, I'm trying to value a property right now I'm finding almost impossible to value. And the details of it aren't all that interesting. But the reality is that I saw that there were two properties that are on the market right now, and they're somewhat similar. And so I called those two agents. I know them, they know me. And one of them was like, hey, we just accepted an offer. And between you and me, here's the number. Like they gave me the number of what they're not even in contract yet. And at the co-op, it used to be that nobody would give you anything until a co-op was closed. But that information I now have in my valuation, which I'm providing my client. So I'm able to provide more information to my client to help them understand what their home is worth, because we have like real-time data. And that's only going to come to you because someone trusts you, knows you're not going to go around and tell everybody else, not going to use it against them, but they understand why you're doing it. And what goes around comes around. You have, in order to earn that, you gotta give back. And I think you have to think about the community that way. And then it really helps you. And by helping you, it helps your clients.
Yeah, that is such fantastic wisdom right there. And John, we always ask, and Jeremy, I'm going to ask you too very shortly, what strategic advice are you going to tell people out there, but I'm not going to get there yet. I want to follow up first. And we always hear this. We always hear this from top agents that, you gotta respect your fellow colleagues. You gotta embrace, get friendships, get close with them, be nice to them. Because you know what? We talk a lot about agent intelligence over at UrbanDigs. Like, the AI that we believe in is agent intelligence. We believe the human is where it's at. And intelligence doesn't mean necessarily charts or comps or market reports or data or that kind of stuff. That's one piece of it. Another piece of it is exactly what you talked about. And that is such a critical thing. And you think about doing a high level of service for your consumers. If you're able to get that intel from the community to pass down to your client to make a better decision, and there's a trust there, that's a valuable skill set that's going to, push your career up and to the right, which is where I think
just to add to that, and this is something that, you guys are we rely on you so much, on UrbanDigs so much, and what you guys do is so great and helpful. And part of my letter to every single potential seller, I talk about, at the end of the day, well, there you go, hearts everywhere, is, what is the perceived value of what is going to be the perceived value of your home? And that's what we're trying to figure out before we price your home, is what are other agents going to perceive the value of your home to be? And the reality is you can give people just a set of comps, and you could give 5 agents the same set of comps, and they might come up with 5 different perceptions of what the value is. And so it's so important to be, I often will invite agents in to properties before we've even listed them. And I'm not trying to sell them off market. I'm just saying, hey, look, got the listing, but I want to know, like, what do you think this is worth? Like, and here's the data points, and here's the set of comps that I pulled. But walk around. Let me know, what do you think? And we have conversations about it. And they're like, well, yeah, I get the comps, and yes, you're bigger than the other apartments, but there's a diminishing return. Or I don't think a client is ever going to spend more than X on a 2-bedroom apartment, period. Or whatever it is, things that just are intangible. They can't come through in a comp chart. And that's talking about perception with people who are going to shape the perception, who are then going to shape the market. And your client who is going to be the seller, needs that information before you list. Because as you guys know, the first 3 weeks of the listing are the most important 3 weeks. And so you want to get that price right. And as much as we want it to be objective, there's a lot of subjectivity to it, which is so informed by your peers.
That is the blueprint for 4D chess in real estate. That is awesome stuff.
Yeah. This has been great. This has been great. I hope a lot of agents out there, I hope they befriend you. I hope they email you and say, thank you for this video. And maybe one day we'll get to work together. Maybe I'll be able to get some intel from you one day that'll help me do a deal. That's the kind of stuff it's all about. But you know what? There's been a lot of actionable takeaways from this. And Jeremy, thank you for the very kind words of UrbanDigs. Thank you for sharing excellent wisdom out there for a lot of other agents to take it their own way and mix it into their business in their own way. And hopefully it helps their business down the road. But this has been great. This has been great. So thank you.
Thank you guys. It's always a pleasure. You guys are terrific. You've really changed the way the business works.
Oh.
And I applaud you.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, man. That's great. We love hearing that. Jeremy Stein, top agent over at Sotheby's. Fantastic. Thank you so much for the time. That is John Walkup. I am Noah Rosenblatt. We are both with UrbanDigs. This has been Talking Manhattan, and we'll catch you guys next time. Cheers, everybody.